In this video, I'm going to show you some of the progress I've made with the scene editing tools. Now, from my perspective, this is kind of the stuff that comes very last. But from the end user's perspective, this comes first because this is the stuff that you interact with most, and it's just very visual. It's very this is just the visceral user experience is using these tools. So it's important to get them right. So just like in LeadWorks, you can drag and drop and create in the 2D viewports like that. But you can also draw things in the 3D viewport. And once I started doing this, I just didn't want to stop. It's very convenient. It's very nice. And it's also great to have both those views available, because if I start dragging something here, depending on where I'm positioned in the scene, I might not be able to see it that well. Like I can't really tell if this corner lines up, but up here I can very easily see, okay, this needs to be adjusted here. Now in LeadWorks, we would move objects around. When you select something, you would move things around in the 3D perspective like this. And a while back, like a couple years ago, I did some experiments with just grabbing the object and moving it with your mouse. And the way I was actually doing this is I let the mouse travel a certain distance and then figured out what that vector was. And then I figured out, okay, which axis does that most closely match? Like, in other words, if you dragged this way, it would start dragging the entire object this way. If you dragged something close to this direction, then it would go in the horizontal direction. And if you dragged something that looked like it was vertical, it would start going up and down. You can see here, like if you dragged this way, it would go back. And if you dragged this way, it would go vertical. And you have to let the mouse travel like a few pixels at least before you can determine which direction the user intends to go. And it was kind of cool because it almost felt like you were just grabbing the object like in real life. When it worked, it felt very intuitive, but you got into a lot of situations where like these two vectors were just too close and you would drag something and it would go in a direction that you didn't want it to. So I didn't pursue it beyond that. But I did come back to that idea. And so I have that implemented now in Ultra. Except it's a little bit different. The way I did this is when you drag something in the 3D viewport, it moves along the XZ axis, the flat plane. It doesn't consider the y-axis. And then if you hold the Alt key, then you can go up and down. And once I started working with that, it's again, like I just didn't want to go back. It was very, very convenient. And the reason I like this is because if you have this object selected, you have to click on this. You have to find and hover over this little tiny arrow or this, and then you can move the object around. Well, the center of it might be off screen, or it might be hidden behind something else. It might not be that obvious, like where you're supposed to click. And it creates a lot of friction right there because you spend like, a few seconds searching for the right spot to click on. And I think I've talked about that before. Like when you're searching for the right place to click on and it's small, that actually creates a lot of friction in the user workflow. That's why I don't like tabbed interfaces. Like I experimented with opening multiple files in a single window with tabs separating them. And it was simply because finding that small little spot that you're supposed to click on to get to where you're going, that really slows things down. And with the approach I have now in Ultra, it's just super, super intuitive. So that works really well for translation. I'm very, very happy with that. Yeah, this is final. This is definitely, I wouldn't do it any other way than this. This is great. For rotation, I tried to do something similar. Not recently, but like back in the day when I was first experimenting with this, I would like try to grab this side over here and pull it and try to infer like which axis I was rotating around. And it just didn't work. Rotation is a complicated matter, especially when it's on 3 axes. You really can't beat this kind of an interface. This can still be improved a little bit. It would be nice if there was a little indicator in the center showing like, the angle you had traveled. But this approach really cannot be beaten. This is a bit better than what I did in Leadworks, which is admittedly like this is sort of the 3D widget here, this little gizmo here, this is pretty low effort, honestly. These were kind of cool, I guess. This is sort of a holdover from Hammer. Yeah, that was kind of cool. I like this. But this admittedly was very low effort. This is nice because, well, in 3D it's a lot more clear what I'm doing. But in the 2D viewport, I can rotate along any axis. So every viewport, 2D or 3D, can rotate on every axis. So that's very, very good. Okay. Now the really innovative part here is we have translation. That's cool. We have rotation. Okay, nothing terribly special there. Scaling in this interface is really, really cool, and I'll show you how it works. So when you have the scale tool activated, you've got this wireframe showing the bounding box of the object. And this is actually showing the bounding box, right? It's not the brush itself. But when you hover over one of the faces of the bounding box, it highlights that edge, that face. And as long as I have 2 faces of the object visible, or the bounding box rather, then I can highlight every single face. Because I can go right to the edge and get underneath it, or whatever I need. And when you click and drag, it does that. I can even grab this back edge or the bottom. This is super, super cool. Honestly, like 3D editing with 3D would really not be useful without this. This is much better than the conventional scaling tool that Leadworks uses. Let's see, scale. Yeah, this is not very useful. Not even sure if it lines up to the grid. Yeah, I guess it does. But yeah, this is not very useful. This is super, super useful. And this idea came from a program I found. I got some inspiration from called Trench Broom. I think my implementation is better. So let's see, I think this is the scale tool. Yeah. Trench Broom, it's hard to see what's going on here because they tried to do allow you to highlight two faces at once, although it's not tracking the horizontal and vertical scaling separately. It just scales them uniformly, which kind of sucks. And it's just, the little indicator is dancing all around, and it's hard to tell like what you're even. You end up. It creates a lot of situations where you drag something and you don't. Yeah, you don't know which direction it's going to go in. Like, what's the difference between why is it this selected and now this is selected? It's just hard to use. I see what they were going for, and I admire the kind of the purity of the vision of this program, because it's like the 2D viewports and the 3D viewports all use the exact same controls, but it's just not very... it's kind of not user-friendly, although it's a good idea. I think this implementation is just a lot better. It only allows you to drag on one axis at a time, so you don't get those, WTF moments. So that's what I've got so far. There's a few more tools that will be added to this, but this will allow you to do all your editing. Let's see. In a single 3D viewport if you choose to.